You ever take a dump and think, what is this thing that I'm sitting on? What is this device that's eating my feces? Me too. I've thought that too many times before. So often that I've done research on it. Not good research, but research nonetheless. The Vietnam bomb toilet. Get a lot of that right. That's a weird sentence. Yeah. So in October of 1965, a fellow named Commander Clarence W. Stoddard Jr., probably should have gotten his full name, of the USS Midway, he dropped a toilet that was a bomb on the North Vietnamese to celebrate the 6 millionth ordnance drop. So the plane came all the way from Dixie Station, which is a bunch of boats in the ocean, I imagine, and it flew off from there. And they dropped it on the Mekong Delta River, which is a very big river, I think. Not entirely sure. It's a river, and they dropped it, and it blew them up. Probably killed some people. Almost killed the pilots, but I'll get to that. The toilet was just some busted ass garbage that they used on the ship, but eventually it broke, and they were about to throw it out. But then I don't remember who saw it and was like, "Hey, we could use that for something." And so he made the genius decision to be like, no, boys, fellas, don't throw it overboard. That's pollution, that's bad for the environment. Instead, modify it, turn it into a bomb, chuck it on a plane, and then just drop it on those bushes, those Vietnamese, those speaking bushes. Dropping the bomb, the toilet bomb, almost killed the pilots. It almost, as they were dropping it somehow, it almost nearly struck the plane and would have blown it up and killed everyone. Well, it was like 2 dudes. They actually did film it, like the dropping of the bomb, but apparently the footage has been lost, which is unfortunate, but it probably would have been garbage quality anyway. I did actually see a video of like the toilet just on the plane, and yeah, it's terrible quality. It's so dark, and there's no sound. It's kind of eerie, honestly. Funnily enough, this wasn't the first time an appliance was used like this. In 1952, it's not a toilet, so really who cares, but anyway. 1952, during the Korean War, the US dropped a bomb with a kitchen sink in it. Well, no, it was a kitchen sink that was turned into a bomb. But yeah, like I said, who cares? It's not a toilet, it's a kitchen sink. I don't care about those. They're not funny. You don't shit in a kitchen sink. Well, some people do. I have. No, I haven't. Don't lie. Space toilets. You ever wonder how people take a dump in space? Well, you're about to find out in a minute. But before that, get a load of this fun story. In 1961, the first man in space, Alan Shepard, was sitting in the cockpit. I don't know. The front part where you fly up. He was sitting in that for so long, for 3 hours specifically, or maybe longer, but the launch was delayed for 3 hours. And in that time, he had to go to the toilet specifically to take a wee. And, the eggheads over at NASA didn't think, maybe we should have some sort of appliance for him to urinate in. And that kind of went over their head. So he messaged, text them, mission control, I need a piss. And they said, just go in the suit. And so he did. He urinated in his suit. And so the first man, Alan Shepard, flew into space with his soiled undies. He urinated himself. But eventually, they did develop a toilet. So this new toilet that NASA made, or I think NASA made it, that doesn't matter. This new toilet that cost $1 gazillion, it has a hose that you pee into. So if you're a dude, you just slip your sausage inside and then urinate down into the hose thing. I think if you're a woman, there's like a sort of cup thing that you sort of place over the top, and then you do it. I think, I don't know, I couldn't really find much, but that's what I had to guess. Don't use any of this for real research or anything. I'm an idiot. To take a dump, it's a lot more like your typical toilet, where you just sit on it and then you do your business. It's like way smaller, the toilet seat, basically, so nothing can slip out the side and just slap you on the face while you're doing the work. But there's also a bunch of like footholds and like all sorts of just little bars to help you keep yourself stabilized and in place. Because if you're in space, there's no gravity. You're slipping, slapping, and sliding all around, flying everywhere. So yeah, once you're finished peeing and you finish pooing, after you've done urinating, water is very liquids and water, they're very rare in space. There's not too many of them, so they got to recycle. So the water or urine gets recycled and filtered into drinkable water. I assume it gets filtered. I mean, it'd be gross if it wasn't.
Before you cringe at the thought of drinking your leftover wash water and your leftover urine, keep in mind that the water that we end up with is purer than most of the water that you drink on a daily basis at home.
Luckily enough, the poo isn't recycled. It is put into a container that is then shot out into the Earth's atmosphere, leaving it to burn up. Basically, when you take a dump, it gets put into like a little bag, and then a ship comes to drop off stuff, and then it leaves to go back to Earth. And then as it's entering Earth's atmosphere, it flings out little bag poos, and then they just go flying throughout the atmosphere and burn up. And there's a possibility that they may or may not be shooting stars sometimes. It's not really known who created the first toilet. It was either the Scottish in a Neolithic settlement dating back to 3000 BC, or the Greeks who constructed the Palace of Knossos. In 315 AD, the Romans had a communal toilet system. People would often take dumps as a group. The Romans considered it a social gathering. So, that's cool. To wipe themselves, they would just use a stick with some sponge on the end, and they all shared the stick, like all of them. In medieval England, people would often use these things called potties. I'm pretty sure it's just a big bowl that they would dump into and presumably urinate into as well. No, probably just dump into. And they would just throw their waste out of the window or door, just onto the street, onto the peasant kids. The wealthier and the more influential people weren't such savages. No.
Nope.
They would use these things called garter robes, or a garter robe, which is essentially, you just go to a room, you sit on some cold rock, and then you take it and you shit in a hole, and then it falls out of the building, like just down somewhere, usually into like a pit, or sometimes off a cliff. So that's fun. The peasants and the serfs were a little bit luckier. They got to use communal privies, which were, I think, also just holes, but you got a bit of privacy with it. Eventually, a giant public garderobe was built over the river Thames. I probably should have checked what it was before recording this.
River Thames.
As you can imagine though, a giant river that runs through England and London mainly, with a bunch of feces in it. It was very stinky, and it got people very sick. Eventually, this thing called the commode overtook the garderobe and public toilets and became the new norm. So a commode is sort of like the more modern toilet, almost. Well, not quite. It's basically just a chair you sit in with a pot beneath, and then you just take a dump into the pot, and then you remove the pot, and I don't know, probably throw it out a window or something. The first modern flush toilet is often believed to be created by a man named Thomas Crapper in the 1860s. That's his actual name, by the way. That's probably why it's referred to as the Crapper. But yeah, no one has that name anymore. No one's name is Crapper. Anyway, so yeah, it was believed that he did it, but that's wrong. It was actually 300 years earlier when a guy named Sir John Harrington invented one for himself and his godmother, Elizabeth I. So yeah, in the 1800s, Britain's population just skyrocketed. People were banging all the time, everywhere.
Then AIDS ruined everything.
However, not enough toilets were constructed to coincide with the population increase. So this led to a lot of people just dumping whatever and all sorts of stuff, and sewage was spilling out into the rivers and onto the streets. Very disgusting, very yucky, lots of diseases. The spillage then at some point contaminated the water supply, and water would come out brown. The water was also contaminated with chemicals and horse manure and a lot of dead animals. Tens of thousands of people died from waterborne diseases. In 1848, the government decreed that every house should have a water closet or an ash pit privy. There were these dudes that were hired called night soil men, and they would discreetly remove the waste during the night. So they would like sneak into, well, you'd have it at like the back of the house or whatever, or something like that. They would open up a little compartment, take the poo, load it into the back of a wagon, and take it somewhere to be recycled as fertilizer. In 1858, there was a particularly hot day which caused the rotting sewage to stink up Britain. This is referred to as the Great Stink or the Big Stink or something, I don't quite remember. Eventually, beneath the city, a sewer system was constructed in 1865, which, made people not die nearly as much. Fun fact, did you know that King George II died by falling off of his toilet? So the story goes, in 1760, King George was 77 years old, blind in one eye and hard of hearing, which is honestly kind of surprising that someone lived to that old in the 1700s. People were popping off like flies. It's like, whoa, I'm 30, boom, they're dead the next day. On October 25th, he woke up as usual, and he even had a little hot chocolate, and after finishing, he went to his clothes stool, aka toilet. After a few minutes, his valet heard a loud crash. The valet decided to investigate, only to find the king on the ground. Frank Nichols, the king's physician, stated he appeared to have just come back from his necessary stool as if going to open his escritoire, whatever the fuck that is. King George was put back into his bed and Princess Amelia was sent for, but before she could make it, the king was dead. His autopsy revealed that he had died of thoracic aortic dissection. I don't know what that is. I looked it up, and it was very confusing. But apparently, this isn't even a crazy thing. Like, people aren't dying left and right from falling off toilets, but apparently, almost 40,000 Americans a year hurt themselves falling off the toilet. What's going on over there? What is going on in the United States of America? You silly bucks. Yeah, another fun fact. Originally, the word toilet is French, and it means the act of washing, dressing, and preparing oneself. Isn't that crazy? You know what is crazy? In February 2008, the police were called to the residence of Corey McFerrin in Nest City, Kansas. Upon arriving, McFerrin said to the police that there was something wrong with his girlfriend. Turns out that McFerrin's 35-year-old girlfriend, Pam Babcock, had been sitting on the toilet for over 2 years. She had been sitting for so long that her skin had grown around the toilet seat. They eventually got her into the hospital where the toilet was surgically removed from her body. It was eventually discovered that Pam had some sort of mental disorder, and whenever McFerrin would ask her to get out of the toilet, she would simply reply with, "Maybe tomorrow." Man, it's crazy that that's only happened one time ever, except it hasn't. Because next year, in 2009, a Chinese woman in Singapore also spent a 2.5-year-long stint on a toilet, 902 days in total. She did get up and shower, but only 18 times over the course of 2 years. Eventually, her husband called the emergency services and they removed her from the toilet seat. She once stated that she felt a force holding her down. What is believed to be the first appearance of a toilet on television was in the 1957 sitcom Leave It to Beaver. In the episode, Beaver and his brother Wally order an alligator from an ad in a comic book. They hide the gator named Captain Jack, funnily enough. They hid the gator named Captain Jack in the toilet tank. The network censors feared that there would be so much backlash that they only showed the tank and not the full toilet. So you know how there was like a disease going around, like a virus a couple years ago, it was killing everyone, made you real sick? And you know how there are a bunch of shortages because of it? And you remember how a lot of people got scared that they were going to run out of toilet paper, so they started buying up toilet paper and hoarding it?
In a toilet paper tussle.
I just want one pack. No, not one pack.
It's not the Thunderdome. It's not Mad Max. We don't need to do that.
In 1973, the staff of the Johnny Carson show stumbled across an article in the paper about a Wisconsin congressman named Harold Froelich, who voiced a concern that the US would soon run into a paper shortage. Johnny Carson joked about a nationwide toilet paper shortage on his show, but his audience took it extremely seriously. The next day, people ran down to the store and bought as much toilet paper as they could, and they hoarded it. Some stores even price gouged some customers to make a little extra. The next night, Carson stated that it was all a joke and there wasn't going to be a toilet paper shortage. So that's wild that that's happened before. Goodbye. Appreciate you watching this. Love you.